All right, Rabosai, good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking our sponsors for this morning. Sure to thank all of our TALMUD TORAH sponsors, Barak Hashem, for the month of Elul, Shaindy and Avraham Kelman in honor of Yechiel's engagement, to Ilana Falick in memory of their parents, Jerome and Bernice Kelman, and Alexander and Friderica David, Zechus Lebovits, Barak, Maia, Sandy Hoffman, Dora, Lemus and Melamed in memory of Reuven ben Emanuel, Rishona Lebovits, and Ayal Sara Steinberg in the zechus of refuah shelema for Shulamis bas Susha and for her continued health. Daf Yomi Shiur in the zechus of refuah shelema for Yehuda ben Michal. We thank all of our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for their incredible generosity. We thank our Week of Learning sponsors, Matt and Diane Marks, on the occasion, the celebration of the birth of their grandson Yehuda Yeshaya ben Moshe Eliyahu. We hope that in the merit of the TALMUD TORAH, baby Zochem Yirtzeh Hashem to grow Torah to chuppah and to maisim tovim. We thank our Daf Yomi sponsors today, Matt and Rishona Lebovits, in honor of Matt's father's birthday, Mr. Marc Lebovits. Mazel tov, ad mea ve'esim shanim tovos. And also with that, let us begin. Baruch Hashem, so beautiful to see so many beautiful sponsorships. So also with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Nun Vav 56. So we actually left off. I realized I should have gone one more line. You had two more lines yesterday. But all right, we left off 3 lines up from the bottom on Nun Hey Amud Beis 55b. Just to reorient ourselves a little bit. So we began, this sugya began on the bottom of Nun Hey Amud Aleph 55a, where the Gemara quoted the position of Reb Elazar ben Azariah. What did Reb Elazar ben Azariah say? That halacha l'maisa, a woman is entitled to a ksuvah at different stages. So from Erusin, she's entitled to Iker Ksuvah. So again, primary part of the Ksuvah, for a Basula 200 zuz, for an Almana 100 zuz, and any Tosefes, any supplemental amounts, she only becomes entitled to as of when? Only as of Nisuin. That I will say, interestingly enough, the Gemara says what Reb Elazar ben Azariah's position is predicated on is the concept of umdina. What's umdina? I think the way we translated it yesterday was assumptions based on normative human behavior. So the idea of Reb Elazar ben Azariah is like, look, a man will be willing to commit to Iker Ksuvah at Erusin, but Lamaisi is not going to be willing to commit to larger amounts until after Nisuin. So the Gemara then quoted 2 opinions, Rav and Rabbi Nassan. One said that the halacha is like Reb Elazar ben Azariah. One said the halacha is not like Reb Elazar ben Azariah. The Gemara understood that machlokas is based on whether or not you accept the principle of umdina. That's what it said. And the Gemara wanted to suggest that it must be Rabbi Nassan who holds like Reb Elazar, because Rabbi Nassan holds of umdina. So the Gemara, Gemara proved that. Just giving you the whole background. Then the Gemara said, well, one second, Rav doesn't hold of umdina, and then the Gemara went through this exhaustive process. So that's where we left off. And the case we left off with in yesterday's daf was the interesting case of a shchiv meira who goes ahead and makes a deathbed gift, utilizing both mechanisms, the mechanism of a shchiv meira as well as the mechanism of kinyan. So he quoted the opinion of Rav, and then the Gemara was saying, Rav said, what was the point of this? The point of this was the matna shchiv meira was to go ahead and utilize gift giving without kinyanim. So why does he use a kinyan? Ultimately, in order that even if he recovers, the gift should stand. Here's where he left off. Shmuel says, Lo yedana ma'idun be'er. Remember again, Shmuel said, I don't know what to do with this gift. I actually don't know what to do with this. In other words, I don't know how to look at this particular gift. Is this gift to be viewed as a matna shchiv meira, or is it to be viewed as a we'll call it a healthy person's gift, a normal gift? To which the Gemara says, Shema lo gamar leknosu ala b'shtar ve'in shalach hamisa. Shmuel says, I don't know what to do with this, because maybe the shchiv meira only had in mind to convey this with a shtar. And remember again, there is no shtar after death. Right? In other words, you can't convey anything through a shtar after the death of the individual. Ella, so I will say, here's the point. Well, what was the point of the entire Amud Beis? The point of the entire was to highlight to us that Rav himself does hold of umdina. That was the point in all of this. Rav does hold of umdina. So therefore, Ela Tarvayu, Bosai Tap of Nun Vav, Ela Tarvayu, Basar Umdina, both of them subscribe to the concept of umdina, man damer halacha shapir. So we'll say, so therefore, the opinion, i.e. Rabbi, right, the opinion who says that the halacha follows Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, that makes sense. I will say one more time. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah holds of what? Holds of what? Iker ksuva payable as of erisin. Right? Right? Good. Tosefes ksuva payable as of nisuin. Based on what? Assumption regarding normative human behavior. That a person is not going to be willing to commit to additional amounts until after nisuin. So now everyone agrees with the concept of umdina, so fine. So the opinion who holds that the halacha follows Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, that makes sense. However, the Gemara says, man domer ein halacha. I will say, so how do you justify the opinion who holds that the halacha doesn't follow Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah? To which the Gemara says, hachanami umdan daituhu. They will say, could very well be that there's also an umdana play. There's another umdana. What's the other umdana? Mishum ikruve daituhu, v'ha ikrava le daita. They will say, this is very interesting. Why is it that a man pledges tosefes? Right? Think about it just a moment, right? The Chazal instituted a ksuva, right? And they instituted ksuva amounts. Why would a man pledge tosefes? And what's the answer? The answer is because he wants that to engender a certain level of marital closeness. That's the idea. He wants his wife to see. I'm not going to use the word love, right? Because love doesn't necessarily. But he wants his wife to see that she is important to him, right? And he wants her to feel connected to him. So the notion that he's going above and beyond and pledging even more money establishes a closeness. So I will say again, it's quite possible, therefore, that he would commit to that even as of when. Even as of Erison, since Lamaisa, that would engender the closeness. Okay, so I'll say, so the point over here the Gemara is making is that the machlokes Rav and Rabbi Nassan as to whether or not the halacha follows Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah has nothing to do with whether or not you accept or reject the concept of umdina. Why? It sounds like everyone holds of umdina. Everyone holds that in halacha, we make certain assumptions based on normative human behavior. Everyone's agreeing to that. That's not the machlokes over here. The machlokes over here is just almost like a machlokes says, why is he promising the extra, the tosefes ksuva? So one opinion will say, Lemaisa, that's a reflection of the heightened level of relationship that is affected by nisuin. And therefore it only comes into effect by nisuin. The other opinion will say, no, that's in order to create a closeness, and therefore he wants to create this closeness even as of erison. Okay, says the Gemara. We'll see the halacha l'maisa. We've actually seen this halacha l'maisa, but I'm going to show it to you again in just a little bit. Yosef Rav Chanina kamed Rabbi Yanai b'ka'amar halacha Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi Chanina was seen before Rabbi Yanai, and he said the halacha follows Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, namely that a man is chayiv for tosefes as of erusin. Sorry, a man is chayiv for ikr ksuva as of erusin, tosefes as of nisuin. Amar lei puk kari karech libra. Literally, most of what that means is get that out of here. In other words, take that teaching, and take it outside the base medrash. Ein halacha Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. The halacha does not follow Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Amar Rabbi Yisrael Abravdim Mishum Rabbeinu. Halacha Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Okay, so supposed to see you have these conflicting opinions. Rabbi Nachman, Rabbi Shmuel. Halacha Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi Nachman Didei Amar Ein halacha Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So supposed to have a lot of back and forth as to if we're passing Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah or not. For now, Daim Mishmei Rabbi Nachman Army halacha Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Then our Daim named Rabbi Nachman said that halacha in fact follows Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. V'afal gav dilat Rabbi Nachman called Dayan Didayin Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Even though Rabbi Nachman himself was listening to this, even though Rabbi Nachman cursed any judge who paskind like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, nevertheless, right, hachi v'hachi tehavi, so and so should happen to him if he follows Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Afilu hachi halacha ki Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Nevertheless, the halacha is like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi say v'halacha l'maisa. Rabbi say, by the way, it's very interesting. You don't find that phrase in Gemara too often, which is really quite interesting. V'halacha l'maisa. The practical halacha is ki Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So I both say, so therefore again, this is the end of the sugya, and the sugya ends off by say that the halacha in fact does follow Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, not the Tana Kama, and therefore a man is only obligated in Iker Ksuva as of Erisin, and the obligation for Tosefes only comes about as of Nisuin. As of Nisuin. So I will say, I want to clarify this halacha because we actually spoke about this, but this is very important. The Rambam in Hilchos Ishus, Perek Yud Halacha Yud Aleph says as follows. Let me tell you it outside, and then I will say, see, when you read this Gemara, so it sounds like, when does Kesuva take effect? Erusin. Right? Now remember, when you couple that with other things that we've learned, remember, how does the Gemara define, what is a Kesuva? It is a T'nai Bezdin. Because it's a T'nai Bezdin, does it have to be written? No. Remember, we saw this explicit Mishnah. Even if you did not write a Kesuva for your wife. By the way, this little chazar is not going well, right? And so even if you go ahead and you don't write a Kesuva for your wife, the Kesuva obligation is there. That's what it means that it's a T'nai Bezdin. You didn't write a Kesuva, you don't believe in Kesuva, you're a conscientious objector to Kesuva, that's fine. But Maia says it's a T'nai Bezdin, so if you get married, it's there. So I will say, the Rambam points out something very important. Chazal only instituted Kesuva from Nisuin. The only way there's going to be a Kesuva from Erusin is when? If husband goes out of his way to commit himself. In other words, you could commit yourself to a Kesuva from Erusin. But when does the T'nai Bezdin kick in? And I will say, by the way, in order to commit yourself to Kesuva from Erusin, what do you have to do? You have to record it. You have to write a document. But if you don't do anything, when does the T'nai Bezdin of Kesuva kick in? Only as of Nisuin. This is very, very important. So when we have these discussions, this is what the Rambam says, listen to this. Hama'aris es ha'isha v'kasav l'ksuva. If a man does Erusin and he writes a Kesuva for his wife, and they haven't gone into the chuppah, so they haven't had Nisuin, so ultimately, again, what's the halacha? In Meis, O Gersha, Gova, Iker Kesuva, Samim Nechor. She only collects Iker Kesuva. Avalim Eres Isha. But if you did Erusin, and you did not write a Kesuva, and then they get divorced, or he dies, Ein La Klum. There's no Kesuva. So we'll say this is incredibly important. So really, the way you have to look at this halacha is in stages. Kesuva is T'nai Bezdin. T'nai Bezdin means that whether you did it or you didn't do it, it's that the halachic obligation is there. But the T'nai Bezdin only kicks in as of Nisuin. And therefore, as of Nisuin, if a woman is widowed or divorced after Nisuin, what does she collect from her Kesuva? What does she collect? Everything. Iker Kesuva, Tosefes Kesuva. There is no default Kesuva as of Erusin. The only time you'll have an Erusin Kesuva is when husband actively goes out of his way to write one for his wife. So now if husband actively writes a Kesuva for his wife and then dies or divorces during Erusin, now we paskin like Reb Elazar ben Azariah. So what does she collect from Erusin? Only Iker Kesuva. Only the primary amount. So even though they're in Erusin, he wrote two amounts. He wrote, I'm giving you 200 zuz Iker Kesuva, 500 zuz Tosefes Kesuva. If she is widowed or divorced from Erusin, all she collects is Iker, does not collect Tosefes. That's the halacha, I will say. Very important clarification. Good, let's go back there. So, why Rabbi Nichnas al Chuppah? So, we'll say, now that we've established that halacha is like Reb Elazar ben Azariah, and therefore Tosefes amounts are only collectible as of Nisuin. So, some interesting cases. Why Rabbi Nichnas al Chuppah v'lo nivala mahu? They will say, what happens if she enters into the chuppah and there was no bia? So I'll say, so just to illustrate this case, right? So what happens? They have chuppah, so they go into the chuppah. After the chuppah, they get into a fight, right? And then what happens? They get divorced. We've already got the minyan here, let's just take care of this now, right? So they earn, you don't need the minyan for a get, but okay, so whatever, it was a bad fight, right? So they go ahead and they get divorced. So we'll say, so now you've had chuppah, you've had nisuin, but no bia. So the Gemara says, Mahu, chibas chuppah kona. So we'll say, when we say, so now let's take a step back. What was Reb Elazar ben? It's really such a fascinating sugya. We'll say all of these are building on each other, which is really quite interesting. So Reb Elazar ben Azariah said, husband only commits to the tosefes as of when? After nisuin. So we'll say, what's the logic of that? The logic of it is that heightened level of commitment comes from a heightened level of connection to his wife, right? So the shaila is, what is it that affects that heightened level of connection? Is it chuppah or yichud, bia? Bia, which one is it? So the Gemara says, "Mo chibas bia kona." Is it chibas chuppah kona? Is it the fact that ultimately, again, now they sit under the chuppah together? That heightened level of connection is what allows him to commit himself to tosefes. Or chibas bia kona? Or I will say, ultimately, again, is it the heightened level of connection as affected by the bia? So which one is it? So Tashma, the Tana Rabbi Yosef, Shelo Kasavla Ella Al Chibas Laila Harishon. So what's interesting? So Rabbi Yosef says, why does a man commit himself to Tosefes? Or the Tosefes is he commits it to as a result of literally the love engendered by the first night. So what does that mean? I Amrit Bishlama Chibas Chuppah Kona. If you say it refers to Chuppah, Hainu Da'amar Laila Harishon. Then Rabbi say that's why it means the first night. Eli Amrit Chibas Bia Kona. But if it's chibas bia, so ultimately, by the way, the lashon of chibas bia or chibas chuppah kona, this is all an umdina. We assume that husband's commitment to tosefes is ultimately based on a heightened level of relationship. So we're asking, is it the heightened level of relationship as affected by chuppah or as affected by bia? So the Gemara says, I amrit chibas bia kona, bia laila harishon isa mikan ve'elech lesa. So Rabbi Yosef says, and again, if you're saying, so Rabbi Yosef is a different girsa. Rabbi Yosef says a husband commits himself to tosefes based on the heightened level of relationship of chibas laila harishon, the love engendered by the first night. What does that mean? So if you say it's referring to chuppah, makes sense. But if you say it's referring to bia, Rabbi say bia doesn't always occur on the first night that they're married for a variety of different reasons. To which the Gemara says, so bia laila harishon isa mikan ve'elech lesa. Sometimes bia occurs on a subsequent night. Ve'ela mai chuppah. So we'll say it must be when Rav Yosef says what Rav Yosef is speaking about is what we call chibas chuppah. That it's the heightened level of connection affected by standing under the chuppah together that allows the husband to commit himself to tosefes. The Gemara says, one second. Chuppah ba'alayla yifsa b'yemama lesa. So we'll say second wide line. But I don't understand. Is there only chuppah at night, not chuppah by day? Ulatamech. But I could say the same argument the other way. Bia ba'alayla yifsa b'yemama lesa. Is there only bia by day? Only bia at night and not by day. So the Gemara says, Ha'amrava. We've actually seen this Gemara before. Ha'amrava. Im haya bebayis afel mutter. The says an incredible halacha. The say the halacha is that if one is going to be intimate with one's wife, one has to do so in a darkened room. I will say it's an amazing, amazing thing. What's the logic behind that? Chazal were concerned that ultimately a man may see something not attractive about his wife, and ultimately, again, that'll go ahead and ruin their intimate bond. So we'll say it's such an incredible musar. What Chazal were saying is every person possesses physical imperfections, right? Every single person possesses physical blemishes, right? So Chazal were so concerned that even though a man may find his wife so beautiful and so attractive, if he sees that one imperfection, if he sees that one blemish that could ruin their intimate lives, we'll say it's fascinating how that concern only goes one way, right? It goes from men to women. It doesn't go from women to men, which again says a lot. I mean, that's actually quite logical. That men are much more shallow in this particular area. So Lamaisa again. So therefore, again, Chazal were so concerned about this. It's amazing. Chazal wanted a couple to have a healthy and robust intimate life. And they were concerned about things that could ultimately detract from that. So the Gemara says, Bia doesn't have to occur at night. Bia could occur by day as well. It just has to occur in a darkened room. So the Gemara says, Halokasha orech ara kamash malon. That's right. I say, but again, the Gemara perhaps is just saying, Rav Yossi just saying the normal way, and ultimately, again, under normal circumstances, the bia balayla, more often than not, bia occurs by night and not by day. Ella chuppah kashya. So the Gemara says, chuppah nami lo kashya, kevan destam chuppah lebia, kaima orech ara kamashan de balayla. We'll say chuppah also, even though chuppah could be done by day, chuppah is often done at night. Why? Because since the natural progression of the marital union is chuppah, and then again, of course, the celebration, and then the bia, ultimately, again, chuppah is often done at night as well. So therefore, I will say, interestingly enough, the Gemara doesn't seem to resolve this particular issue. So it's just interesting. So now, after we establish that the halacha follows Reb Elazar ben Azariah, namely that a man only commits himself to tosefes, as of what point? As of what point? Nisuin. The shaila then becomes okay. As of what point in Nisuin? In other words, we're accepting the premise of umdina, that ultimately that commitment to tosefes is a function of a heightened level of connection. So now the Gemara says, is that the heightened level of connection of chuppah, or is it the heightened level of connection of bia? So that the Gemara doesn't seem to resolve. So the Gemara goes weiter. By Rav Ashi, nichnes al chuppah pirsani demau. So we're actually going to talk about this sugi because it's actually quite interesting. Let's say the wife goes ahead, right? So Reuven and Rachel are getting married, and Rachel is a nida. She's a nida under the chuppah. And I will say, now obviously, if she's a nida under the chuppah, then what? Then obviously bia can't occur, right? We saw this before. I will say, what do you do in a chuppah's nida, right? You ultimately, again, we saw all of these cases already. We'll talk about chuppah's nida as well. We spoke about nida, by the way, in the case of avelos, right? Avelos and nida we spoke about together. Look at Rashi, pierce and nida, 3 lines down from the top. Rashi says, uperish mimena umes. Now the case we're talking about, I will say, is like this. So Reuven's marrying Rachel. They're under the chuppah, right? So ultimately, nichnas al chuppah. So ultimately, they had chuppah, and then he died. Reuven died. Now he died without what? He died without consummating the marriage. So now here's the shelema. Im timsela marchibas chuppah kona chuppah dechazi lebia aval chuppah delo chazi lebia lo ol dilma lo shna. So we'll say, here's what's amazing. So obviously, so now what's the shaila? Reuven and Rachel had chuppah. They had chuppah. There was no bia. Now Reuven dies. So we'll say, what's the shaila? The shaila is Rachel entitled to tosefes? So if you're going to say that it's chibas bia kona, then obviously no tosefes. But now you're something amazing. What happens if you hold chibas chuppah kona? Right, let's accept that. But is it only a chuppah that is ro'oi lebia, or even a chuppah that's not ro'oi lebia? In other words, we'll say, even if we accept chibas chuppah, that is chuppah that creates the connection. Maybe it's only a chuppah where the chassan and kala know there's going to be bia afterwards. But maybe if it's a chuppah that can't lead to bia, i.e. she's a nida, maybe that does not engender the necessary level of heightened connection so as to entitle her to tosefes, to which the Gemara says, teku. So that stands. So that stands on. So I will say, now what's interesting to note is as follows. What's interesting is the Gemara here seems to indicate, and this is indeed how the Rambam paskins, that halacha l'maisa, it is chibas chuppah kona. That's how we paskin. That ultimately, again, when Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says that as of nisuin, there's a heightened level of connection, which then allows the man to commit himself to tosefes. That heightened level of connection is affected by chuppah. Now, 1 second, does it have to be a chuppah haray lebia or not a chuppah haray lebia? So that the Gemara says, Teiku, we're going to circle back to that sugya. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, imratza kosei lebesur. So we'll say next sugya. So good. Halacha l'maisa, again, now we know we pass Reb Elazar ben Azariah. No Tanai Basin as of Erusin. Tanai Basin only kicks in as of Nisuin, and therefore Ikr and Tosefes collectible as of Nisuin, like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Even if a man committed himself to Kesuva during Erusin, that commitment only covers Ikr, does not cover Tosefes. Chibas, Chopa, Kona creates the high level of connection. Beautiful. Says Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Ratza Lichtov Lebsula. So we'll say, Ratza Kosef Lebsula. So let's remember again, back in the Mishnah, what did Rabbi Yehuda say? Rabbi Yehuda says something very interesting. Rabbi Yehuda says, Reuven's marrying Rachel. So what could happen over here, says Rabbi Yehuda, is Rachel could write back essentially a receipt. Right, so Reuven is the first marriage, so Reuven's writing Rachel Ksua for 200 zuz. Rabbi Yehuda said that Rachel could then write back a receipt that says, I have received 100 zuz from Reuven. It's called a shover. She could write a receipt, even though, again, remember, she hasn't received anything from Reuven, but she could write the receipt that she has received something, and therefore that diminishes the amount that Reuven owes. Says the Gemara of Rabbi Yehuda, the Kosvin Shover, does Rabbi Yehuda hold that we actually write a receipt? Is that how he holds? Vatnan, we learned, Misha para miktsas chovo, if somebody repaid part of his debt. So we'll say, so this is a totally unrelated case. Here's the case. Reuven lent money to Shimon. Reuven lent $10,000 to Shimon. Now we'll say, now what happened? Shimon paid back $5,000. Okay, so now we'll say, what's my problem? What's my problem? We only have a document that says that that Shimon owes Reuven $10,000. So what do we do now? Obviously, you can't just leave that document by itself because then Reuven could potentially illegally collect again. So what do you do? So here we go. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda that we write receipts. Vatnan, here we go. Misha par mixas chobo. If someone went ahead and Shimon paid back $5,000 of his $10,000 debt. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Yachlif. Rabbi Yehuda says Yachlif. We'll say, what does Yachlif mean? Take a look at Rashi. 3 lines down from the top. Yachlif. Yichtov shtar acher kidei chov hanishar. V'yikra harishon v'lo yichtov shover lahara koach halove. Sheisarech lishmor shover menachar. So what is incredible? Rabbi Yehuda says, write up a new document. Literally again, write up a new loan document. This means Yachlif means swap out a new document. Rabbi say, why doesn't Rabbi Yehuda want you to write a receipt? Listen to this. When you write a receipt, who's responsible for the safeguarding of the receipt? The borrower. The borrower, remember again, say the lender has nothing to lose, right? Because remember, when you're writing a receipt, there are 2 documents in existence. What are the 2 documents in existence? Number 1, the original loan document. What does the original loan document say? Reuven lends Shimon $10,000. And then the second document in existence is a receipt. What does the receipt say? Shimon paid Reuven $5,000. Who is vested? Who has the responsibility to hold on to the receipt? Shimon. So we'll say, Rabbi Yehuda holds, it's not fair to place the onus like that on Shimon. It's not fair. Shimon now has the responsibility to hold on to that receipt. Because we'll say, what happens if Shimon loses the receipt? What happens? So we'll say, that's it. Now Reuven can collect the first $5,000 again. So Rabbi Yehuda says it would be unfair to place that burden upon Shimon, the borrower. Therefore, what do? Rip up the old shtar, and go ahead and create a new shtar. Good. Rabbi Yossi Omer no. Rabbi Yossi says, Yichtov lo shover. Rabbi Yossi says, no. Why should you go ahead and tear up the old shtar, right, and write up a new one? Just write a receipt. They will say, now watch this. Look at Rashi. It's really incredible. Rabbi Yossi Omer Yichtov shover, v'lo yachlif, lahara koach hamalve, limcho shibud mizar shol. This is incredible. Listen to this. They will say, when you go ahead, so let's play this out. Let's go. So, right, Reuven goes ahead and lends Shimon $10,000 on the 1st of Av. On the 1st of Av. Right? Shimon now repays $5,000 of it on Aleph Elul, the 1st of Elul. So comes along Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, what do you do? Right. Tear up the old shtar, write up a new one. Why? Because Rabbi Yehuda says it's not fair to place that burden on the borrower. Then now he's going to have to go ahead and hold on to that receipt, because if he doesn't hold on to the receipt, Reuven has a document that says he owes $10,000. Rabbi Yossi says, absolutely not. It's unfair to the to the lender, to tear up the old loan document and write a new one. Why, Rabbi Yossi? Watch this. When you write a new loan document on the 1st of Elul, right? The new loan document says that Shimon only owes Reuven $5,000. We'll say, what's the date on the new document? What's the date? Aleph Elul. And then for Rabbi say, the lien that Reuven has against Shimon's property to collect the rest of the debt is as of Aleph Elul, which now means that Reuven, the lender, just lost a month of encumbering the properties. In other words, and that puts a lender at a tremendous disadvantage. Because let's say over the course of Elul, over the course of Av, Shimon sold properties. So fine, that's not a problem. Reuven has a document that is dated Aleph Av, the first of Av. So any sales that Shimon made between Av and Elul, should Shimon default, Reuven could go and extract that from buyers. So comes along Rabbi Yossi and says, if you go ahead and you tear up that loan document and make a new document with today's date, you have undermined and eroded the power of the lender. So I will say, this is absolutely incredible. Here's what it comes down to. Someone is going to be put at a disadvantage. Right? Someone. Right? If you go ahead and you write a receipt and you keep this old loan document, so the lender has the benefit of the old lien, and now the borrower is disadvantaged. Why? He's got to hold on. He's got to make sure that he constantly holds on to the receipt. And if you tear up the document and write up a brand new document, then borrower, Barak doesn't have to look at a receipt, doesn't have to alter a receipt, but lender now lost all of that encumbrance time between the time of the first document and the second document. So I'll say it's an incredible thing. It's a machlokes of someone's going to have to be put at a disadvantage. I'm sorry? Who's going to be? How would it be both?
Just write up a new one and then you have the receipt, and that way no one.
Oh, good. Dr. Buck is a man of shalom, right? A man of shalom, right? Let everyone suffer, right? Let everyone suffer, good. Which is kind of where we're going to go with this, right? But again, look, I'll point out, obviously you see like the machlokas is, if we don't have to put everyone at a disadvantage, right? So let's not, so just point out, here's the tension. Here, it's fascinating. Here's the tension. So I'll say, so this is the machlokas. So I'll say, by the way, I just want to point out for our purposes, just so you know where we're going with this. So halacha l'maisa, we have a contradiction because Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah said that what? We do write receipts. Right? Reuven gives Rachel a ksuv of 200 zuz. Right? Rachel can write a receipt that says, I received 100 zuz. So according to Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah, we do write receipts. Rabbi Yehuda over here, in this case, in this Mishnah, ultimately of the loan says we don't write receipts. So what's going on over here? So which thing? So Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Kisha Shavarta Mitocha. So we'll say, so kind of in line with what Dr. Buck was saying, there's another way of writing a receipt. You could write a receipt in the loan document itself. In other words, we're both saying, see, we're looking at a receipt as a separate independent document. No, just go ahead, I will say, in the loan document itself, write the receipt, notarize the receipt, right? In other words, initial the receipt. So even though you have a loan document that says Reuven lent Shimon $10,000 on the first of Av, okay, on the bottom, on the side of that document, you wrote, and on the first of Elul, Reuven repaid $5,000 of the debt. Beautiful. So that way you kind of have your cake and eat it too. This way, Lemais again, Reuven the lender has the lien as of the first of Av, right? But Shimon the borrower doesn't have to worry about holding on to a shover. He doesn't, because also remember again, who holds on to a loan document in general? Holds on to a loan document? The lender, right? The lender, obviously, because he wants to collect his money. So this way again, it's on the lender, but the shover, the receipt, is right there in the document itself. Beautiful. Abai says, "Afilu." So I'll say that's Rabbi Yirmiyah's approach, right? And that's why again, Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah. Ultimately, again, so kishur shavar to bitocha. Good. So the Gemara says, Abai says, "Afilu tem b'shein shavar to bitocha." Even if the receipt is not written in the document itself, so bishlama hasam vaday peroi dilma mirkas tavarta umapik leishtara v'hadar gabi zimna achrina. So say, in the case of where there was an actual loan, I understand why we are concerned. Rabbi Yehuda is concerned about writing a receipt. What I say, because again, there's a real fear. What could happen in the case of a receipt? Here, Shimon paid back $5,000. You're writing a receipt. Now, it's Shimon's responsibility to hold on to the receipt. I will say, what happens if Shimon loses the receipt? Really, what happens if he loses the receipt? What happens? Reuven could collect again. And I will say, Shimon has no recourse. Okay, maybe he could produce witnesses, but Lamaisa, he has no documental recourse, right? Lamaisa, he lost, and that's a real concern. So I understand why Rabbi Yehuda doesn't want a receipt written. Rabbi Yehuda just wants a new document written. So the Gemara says, Hacha, vada yavla. So we'll say, in our case over here in the Mishnah, we'll say, what's happening over here? Right? Reuven's writing Rachel a ksuva. Has Reuven given Rachel anything? Has he given her anything? No. Right? Let's remember again, when is ksuva payable? Upon death or divorce. Right? So Reuven hasn't given her anything. So the Gemara says, Hacha, vada yavla milsa ba'almihi. He hasn't given her anything. The only thing that's happening over here, both say, is an exchange of document and exchange of words. So the Gemara says, Milsa da'almihi da'amrale inatre ilo natre iu demasya nafshe. They both say, in the case of the Mishnah, the truth is, the husband is not giving anything. Right? And therefore, again, I both say, it could be that Rabbi Yehuda says, we have absolutely no problem putting the onus on him. In other words, look, Reuven, you're getting married, you owe your wife a ksuva. Okay, she's willing to forgive part of that ksuva. That's fine. No money has exchanged hands over here. She's going to write you a receipt. You know what? She's doing you a favor. Yeah, we'll place the onus of responsibility on you. She'll write you a receipt that says she received 100 zuz. And yeah, the burden is upon you. And so if you lose that receipt, then what? She's going to collect the full ksuva from you or from your estate. So also what the Gemara is suggesting over here is that Lamaisa, this is what Abai is suggesting. Rabbi is suggesting there's a distinction in the cases. You see, in the case where Reuven lent Shimon $10,000 and Shimon paid back $5,000, there's a real concern that if you write a receipt and Shimon loses the receipt, that Shimon is going to be on the hook for money he does not owe. And if Rabbi Yehuda says, that's too much, just write up a new shtar. In the case of the Mishnah, both sides, there's no money changing hands. There's a commitment. She's doing him a tova. She's doing him a favor. I'll forgive part of the ksuva. Fine. She's doing you a favor. Yeah. The burden rests upon you to hold on to the shora, to hold on to the receipt. And Rabbi Yehuda has no problem taking that approach. Interesting. So Bishlam Abaye Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah. So I understand why Abaye does not hold it Rabbi Yirmiyah. So as Rabbi Yirmiyah wanted to say, it's a case of where you wrote the ksuva, the receipt in the document. So the Gemara says, Bishlama Abai Lo Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah Lo Katani Shavarta Mitocha. The Mishnah doesn't make any mention of writing the receipt in the ksuva. Others both say there's no mention of that in the Mishnah. So because there's no explicit mention of that, it's hard to believe that that's what the Mishnah means. El Rabbi Yirmiyah, my time Abaye. So why doesn't Rabbi Yirmiyah accept Abaye's distinction between our case in the Mishnah and the case of lending money? So to which the Gemara says, Gzeira shover dahacha atu shover da'alma. So we'll say in general it could very well be that Rabbi Yirmiyah is concerned, right? Rabbi Yirmiyah is concerned that if we allow you to write a shover in this case, you'll come to what? Write a shover in different cases as well. And Lamaisa, that's concerning for us. Because Rabbi say, remember again, I hear you, by the way, the logic to allow a shover in our Mishnah is very compelling logic. Right? Because at the end of the day, I understand writing a receipt places an overwhelming ongoing burden on the borrower. In this case, by the ksuva, the borrower or the debtor is the husband. I understand that. But Lamaisa, in the case of the Mishnah, where she's just doing him a favor, good, let the burden be upon him. That's fine. That's fine. She's doing you a favor. Let the burden be upon you. Versus a case of Reuven and Shimon where Shimon's borrowing money. And literally, again, if he loses the shover, ultimately, again, he's going to potentially be on the hook to repay money he already repaid previously. I understand why I don't. So I will say, but Rabbi Yirmiyah is just concerned that Lamaisa, if we allow you to go ahead and write a shover in one case, you'll come to write the shover in another case as well. Interesting. To which the Gemara says, time of the kasvaleh. They both say, furthermore, the shover works in this case. Why? Because it's written. Aval al peh lo. See, I both say, what's interesting about this? What's interesting about this is verbal forgiveness doesn't work. That's what it sounds like for the Mishnah. Right? The case in the Mishnah is she's writing, right? Reuven gives Rachel a ksuva, and Rachel gives back in writing a receipt. I have received 100 zuz of my ksuva, which sounds like verbal forgiveness by itself will not work. To which the Gemara says, Amai, Davar Mamanu. But why Rabbi say this is a monetary stipulation? And Rabbi said, we've seen according to Rabbi Yehuda that if you want to forgive a monetary right that is due to you, you have the ability to verbally forgive. Where do we learn this? Listen to this. Ha'omer li'isha, a man says to a woman, Hare'at mikudeshes li'amana she'en lach alai sher ksus va'ona. Interesting marital arrangement, right? A man says to a woman, become mikudeshes on the condition that you have no claim against me for food, clothing, or intimacy. Harezu mikudeshes, it works. Utino batal. And I will say, your Tanai is batal. See, I will say, this is a classic case of what we call masna amashe kasov batorah. If you make a Tanai which runs contrary to Torah law, your Tanai is batal. The Tanai is right, which makes sense. You can't make a condition that runs contrary to previously established biblical law. So a man says to his wife, let's get married on the condition that you have no claim against me for share, ksus, and ona. That's fine, you're married, and the Tanai is batal. Tanai is batal. Now we'll say, watch this. Div Rabbi Meir, this is what Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, bedavar shebemamon tino kayim. So we'll say, interesting, Rabbi Yehuda says, the Tanai is only partially batal. When it comes to intimacy, that's not a monetary issue, therefore that's a biblical right. And halacha l'maisa again, the Tanai is batal. But when it comes to sharing ksus, food and clothing, which ultimately again is a monetary thing, if a woman is willing to forgive the monetary rights due to her, then what? She has the right to do so. I will say, by the way, there would be good reasons for a woman to do this. Because l'maisa, remember again, because a husband gives his wife clothing and food, he gets certain entitlements from her, like her earnings. Let's say a woman has a career, she's fabulously wealthy. She doesn't want her husband to have, she loves her husband very much, but I'm happy to take care of my own financial needs, so she could forgive share and ksus. Thank you very much, but I don't need it. That's what Rabbi Yehuda holds. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer b'davar shemamun tino kayim. So we'll say, so therefore you see according to Rabbi Yehuda that a woman can forgive certain financial rights, and it sounds like what? She could forgive them even what? Even verbally. To which the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda ksuva d'Rabbanan, the Chachamim asu chizuk l'divrayim yosem Michal TORAH. So it's very interesting. Rabbi Yehuda holds that although ksuva is d'Rabbanan, right, Chazal made a ksuva very machmir. Well, almost like a daraisa. And therefore, again, Chazal said the only way for a woman to go ahead and forgive her ksuva entitlements is how? To go ahead and put it in writing. The Gemara says, "Hari peros t'Rabbanan for the Abdulhu Rabbanan d'chizuk." Yet again, a husband's entitlements to peros, I will say, which means that if a woman brings in nichsei malog, she brings in property into a marriage, although she retains title, he gets the rights of usage. To which the Gemara says, and yet we Chazal, we're not machmir on that. Disnan, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, the olam hu ochal pere peros, achi yichtov la din udvarim enli b'nechsayich. So I will say, a husband eats pere peros. Pere peros also means, let's say she takes the produce of her land, sells it, and purchases new land. He's allowed to get benefit from that new land. So she has rights in it until he writes to her, Dinu dvarm enli b'nechsayich u'perosein u'beperos ad olam. Amud beis the kaimalon my kosev. And Abba said, we said, what does it mean when it says he writes? Writes doesn't mean writes. Oh, rather, my kosev. Omer. Rather, I will say kosev means say. In other words, I will say, what do you see? Once again, you could forgive financial entitlements verbally. It doesn't have to be written. So why is it that Rabbi Yehuda, so I'll say again, we're focused on one very simple thing over here. Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah says that what? If Reuven marries Rachel and gives her a ksuva, and Rachel wants to forgive part of her ksuva, what does she do? She writes a receipt back to Reuven. I have received 100 zuz of my ksuva. So the Ma'aseh said the Gemara is hung up on this idea. Why does she have to write it? Right? In other words, that Lamaisa, why can't she just verbally forgive it? So the Gemara is bringing examples of financial entitlements that could be forgiven verbally and don't need a written vehicle for forgiveness. So the Gemara says, Abaye, la kol yish ksuva. So I'm going to say, here's for example, a husband is entitled to peros. Husband is entitled to literally, again, the usage of his wife's property. If he wants to forgive that right, how does he forgive that right? Or how can he forgive that right? Verbally. So you see that when it comes to a financial entitlement, it can be forgiven verbally without a written instrument. To which one says, not a good example. I'm Abaye, la kol yish ksuva lo la kol yish peros. Here's the difference. Every woman is entitled to ksuva, but not every single husband gets peros. Now, what does it mean not every single husband gets peros? Peros is a function of what? Function of what? Property. Let's say a woman who doesn't bring property into a marriage. It definitely happens. So the Maisa, if there's no property, so ultimately there's no peros. So that's why it could very well be peros is not a fixture in a marriage. It's not a fixture in a marriage. So the Maisa, perhaps that's why it can be verbally forgiven. Ksuva is a fixture in a marriage. So maybe something that's a fixture can only be forgiven in writing. Ultimately, as something that is common. Ultimately, again, the rabbis solidified their law. In this case, the solidification of rabbinic law is that halacha l'maisa, just saying something verbally is not enough. You're going to have to put it into writing. Also, the lo shchicha lo avdu be rabbanan chizak. We'll say something that is not as common, i.e., peros. Chazal did not feel the need to go ahead and strengthen it by requiring you to forgive it in writing. Okay, let's bring up another case. Hari chamarim. I will say, what about the case of donkey drivers? So this is actually an interesting case. We've actually seen this before. So the Gemara says, this is a common case, and ultimately, again, Chazal, we're not machmir in this case. And I will say, ultimately, again, what's the case? Look at here we go. Disnan. If donkey drivers entered into the city, so we've actually seen this case before. Seen this case before, just a few weeks ago. So the Gemara says, "Disnan, donkey drivers entered into the city. Supposed to listen to this. So the interesting case, right? Two donkey drivers walk into the city. So driver A says, "Listen, you know what? My produce is new. My friend's is old." Now, both Rashi points out over here, older produce is better. You see, we think about old produce as spoiled. In this case, we're talking more about grain, where the moisture is gone, right? So because the moisture is gone, therefore, again, there's less possibility of rottage. Rottage? Is that a word? Spoilage. Thank you. Spoilage. So the Gemara says, so now what happens over here? So the two donkey drivers come in. So you have one saying, "Oh, you know what? My stuff is good. My friend's is better." Or sheleimah metukan v'shel chaveri metukan. Right? My produce has not been tithed, but my friend's produce has been tithed. Ein ne'emanin. They're not believed. I will say, why are they not believed? So there's a concept, ultimately, again, of Rashi points out over here, of chayshinon legomlin. We are concerned about reciprocity. I will say that's what? This is, what's the word? This is, it's a setup. It's a conspiracy, right? They agreed amongst themselves before we go into the town. Listen, right? You say your stuff is not good, and my friend, tell everybody my friend's stuff is good. In the next town, I'll say my stuff is not good, my friend's stuff is good, and that's how they conduct business, going town to town. In Ne'emanim, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ne'eman. Rabbi Yehuda says, ultimately, again, they are Ne'eman. Shabbos Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that halacha l'maisa lo chayshina ligmulin. We're not concerned that there's a conspiracy, right? That there's a subterfuge over here. So here we go. Amar Abaye. So now I want to point out something very interesting over here. Now remember, chamorim, right, donkey drivers, are assumed to be Ami haaretz. Whenever you deal with the produce of an Am haaretz, what is that called? Demai. So what do you see, or something very interesting? That now demai is dirabanan. Yet you see that according to Rabbi Yehuda, Chazal lo asu chizuk l'divreihem. We're not machmir with dinei drabanan. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, ultimately again, when the just I want to point out, when the donkey drivers come in, donkey driver A says my produce is not tithed, but my friend donkey driver B, his produce is tithed. Rabbi Yehuda says what? We listen to them. Now 1 second. So remember again, let's take a step back, right? Let's bring this all together. What are we doing here? Right? It's a good question, right? We can ask that question every morning. What am I doing here? So again, we are rooted in a Mishnah. In our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda says, Reuven marries Rachel. Rachel wants to forgive half of her ksuba. How does Rachel forgive half of her ksuba? How does she do it? In writing, with a shover. Meaning what? She cannot do it verbally. Why can't she do it verbally? So if we bring this all down, because essentially, even though ksuva is dirabanan, Chachamim asu chizuk l'divreihem. Chazal were machmir when it comes to their own law. And therefore Chazal said, with a ksuva, that's a fixture, the only way to forgive it is in writing. That's what I said, that's the phrase. Asu chachamim chizuk l'divreihem. Chazal were machmir with their laws. That's Rabbi Yehuda. 1 second. So we'll say, here I now have another case of rabbinic law. What's the case of rabbinic law I'm dealing with over here? Demai. Right? 2 donkey drivers come in. A says, my produce is not tithe, but my friend's B is tithe. Rabbi Yehuda says, you could believe him. Really? Rabbi Yehuda, you just said when it comes to rabbinic law, we have to be machmir. Demai is rabbinic law. Based on that, we should be machmir over here as well. To which the Gemara says, no. Amra Abaye, here we go. Vaday de divreim avdu rabbanon chizuk. Safek de divreim lo avdu rabbanon chizuk. I will say there's a big distinction. When Rabbi Yehuda says that lamaisa we are machmir with rabbinic law, I will say what cases of rabbinic law? What cases of rabbinic law? Definitive cases of rabbinic law. With demai, I will say what is demai? I want to say at the end of the day, when you look at the tithe of an Amma Aretz, how should you really look at the tithe? How do you look at it? What do you see when you look at? What do you see when you look at the produce of an Aretz? What do you see? What you really see is produce that is most probably tithed, right? Chazal were machmir. The chance that he didn't do it, but l'maisa, the statistical probability is that he did it. But l'maisa were machmir. Shabbos says, the Gemara says, it's a suffix. So when are Chazal machmir about their law? In the case of Vadai. But in the case of suffix, they're not machmir. So therefore what comes out over here, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is that halacha l'maisa, ultimately again, she can write the shover. Right? She could go ahead and write the receipt. And it's only in this case of definitive rabbinic law that asu chachamim chizuk l'divrei, that Chazal or machmir, don't allow her to forgive her ksuva verbally and require something in writing. But that idea that Chazal or machmir on their laws is only in a case of definitive rabbinic law, not in a case of suffix like demai. Incredible. Bossi, let's go weiter. Rabbi Meir, Amar Bossi, we're going to see halacha l'maisa, how we paskin in ksuva forgiveness at the end of the next sugya. Rabbi Meir, Omer Kalapok, he said, I will say, the Mishnah ended off with Rabbi Meir. What did Rabbi Meir say? Any man who diminishes the ksuva of his wife, ultimately again, it's a be'ilas znos. It's immorality. Now, what does that mean? Says the Gemara, here we go, Kalapoches afilu bitna. Shabbos, listen to this. According to Rabbi Meir seems to be saying that lamaisa, even if you diminish your wife's ksuva with her consent, right? Afilu bitna. Look at Rashi. Kalapoches afilu bitna. Midelo tana kol besula she'elam asayim va'amana she'elam mana harizubilas dushmanina dacheshem de'afapi she'gova lebasof. Dein to know kayum afilu haki. I should forget to forgive this for just a moment. Okay, right? Afilu haki keivan demei kara asni karila beilas znos mishum demishas bia lahava samcha daita ksuva. Shabbos say we're going to at least begin this sugya today because this is really fascinating. Shabbos say now watch this. Let's say a man says to his wife. This is your ksuva. On the right, I should say, I'm marrying you on the condition that I'm only giving you 100 zuz for your ksuva. That's what he says. Reuven's marrying Rachel, she's a basula. I'm marrying you, right? Hariat mekudesh asli amanas she'in lachalai elamei zuz. I'm marrying you on the condition that you only have a ksuva claim against me for 100 zuz. And we'll say, what's the halacha? They're married, and what does she have? A 200 zuz ksuva. So Rabbi said, this is fascinating. So the Gemara says, Afilu betina, alma kasavar tina batal, ve'isla. So Rabbi, remember again, when you make a tanai that runs contrary to Torah law, ultimately your tanai is batal. Rabbi said, but watch this. Lechivan de amra la leslach elamana lo samcha daita v'havila bi'ilas znos. So Rabbi said, now watch what's happening over here. This will have to stop. So Lemaisa, the concern over here is as follows. Even though the tanai is batal, right? Lemaisa, since she only thinks that she has a 100 zuz, she's ksuva, she's not fully comfortable with the marriage, and therefore it is a be'ilas dos. So, we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up Emir Hashem with this. I'm sorry we didn't get too far on Amud Beis today, but all right, it'll equal out. There's a short daf in like the next 4 weeks. Emir Hashem will catch up. Let's say shkoyach. We'll stop here for today. Incredible sugya ahead of us tomorrow. A great day. I'm 1.5 Yomi. All right, Chavra Zimmer, have a great day. Thank you, Michal.